Hello, welcome again. In this video, we are going to review EC2. EC2 is an elastic compute cloud, as AWS calls it. You may have seen EC2 in your data center or in your private cloud, potentially on a VMware virtual machine, or maybe with an OpenStack like private cloud, a virtual machine as well. So think of EC2 as your virtual machine that has a certain amount of CPU associated, a certain amount of memory, and you can attach a storage. So in this picture, what we are looking at is an AWS public cloud. Within AWS public cloud, there is something called region. And within a region, we are launching a virtual private cloud, a VPC. You can have a multiple VPC within a region, but it's a regional construct. And within VPC, we are launching two subnet. One is called the public subnet, where we would be exposing our EC2 instance, and the other is a private subnet, where the second EC2 instance in this scenario is not exposed to the public, but it's private, and you cannot get into that EC2 virtual machine by any means. Along with VPC, VPC comes with a router, which allows the communication at a network level within this subnets and within the VPC itself. And as a part of that, we are going to attach an internet gateway to the VPC, which, because of the internet gateway, let's say an administrator or a user who wants to connect to either EC2 or a software running with on that virtual machine, they would need to have an internet gateway. Without internet gateway, this user cannot connect to this public subnet and eventually to this virtual machine. So let's quickly take a look at how it would look like on an AWS console. So what we are going to do is we are going to launch an EC2 instance, and potentially we will connect to that EC2 instance using an SSH mechanism, and we'll see what else we can do on that virtual machine. Okay, so let's jump into AWS console. So here we are on AWS console. I was trying to launch an instance, but let me go to an instance page here. So this is an instance page where these are some of the instances I have not been running. So what we want to do is we want to launch an instance. So click on the launch an instance. Here we can choose how many instances we want to launch. This is the name. We can give any name. Let's call it web server 1. And here is the Amazon machine image, or the AMI they call it, to choose from. Amazon has something called Amazon Linux. If you are looking into install like Ubuntu or Microsoft Windows or Red Hat or SUSE, and there are many other options available, and you can also browse for more AMI. Particularly, you can look for marketplace AMI. Like there are many other third party provides the marketplace AMI, and you can choose from any of these options. So what we want to launch is we want to launch Amazon Linux 2 with kernel 5.10, and it will have some storage which has an SSD volume type. So we'll say okay, select this Amazon Linux 2, and that is what we selected from the catalog. AMI2 published on so and so date. Now here is where you can decide what is your instance type, and there are like 300 plus different instance type you can select. In this scenario, by default, it's chosen as T2.micro. Now, what T2 family allows you to do, and then there are T, then there are R type, then there are M type, and there are GPUs, and you can choose as many as you want. C is a compute heavy. C4 is an older version, C5 is a newer version. There is Also a C6 version is available nowadays. So that's C family, and there would be an R family or M family. M is a general compute. So as you can scroll down, G belongs to the GPU family. So if you have a large machine learning workload and you want to do some GPU analysis, you can launch a GPU host. And if you need a balance of compute and memory, then there is a general purpose compute engine M, which is mainly for a general purpose, where M3 is an older generation, but M5 is a recent generation, and M6, I believe AWS has recently launched as well. So you can choose, pick and choose whatever you want. In this scenario, to be a frugal, what I'm gonna do is T2 or T3 rather dot nano. So what T3.nano is going to give me is a very tiny amount of CPU. In this case, 2 vCPU. Actually, it's I'm gonna let's see the cost difference. T2 nano is 0.00052 US dollar per hour, and T2.micro, which is like 0.0116 US dollar per hour. So this is cheaper. I don't need so much memory. Half a gig memory should be sufficient to just launch an instance, right? We'll just launch and connect via SSH and just verify. Here I already have key pair created, so I'm gonna choose that key pair. This is the VPC in which it's being launched. So remember that VPC is a region construct and you launch within that VPC. In this scenario subnet, we are not giving any preference, and we are telling AWS that, okay, choose any subnet you can select or you want to add this node into. Now this is the security group, which is important here, particularly the firewall, in this case security group, which is a stateful firewall. And what we want to do, we want to create a security group. We'll name it like Launch Wizard 2 is what they are going to create. That's fine. What we want to do is we want to allow SSH traffic, right? So in this scenario, we want to connect to that Linux host and we want to SSH into it. So I'll say, okay, allow an SSH traffic. And we may also install a web server. We may not, but at least enable HTTP traffic. That way, if we end up installing a web server, we can do that. Now here is the warning they have given us, that roles with the source of 0000/0. So what happened is when we do allow SSH from our traffic, there are options. You can do anywhere, you can select a particular IP address, or you can select a particular range of IP address from which anybody can connect via SSH. So for now, for this is a demo, so I'm going to leave it as a 0000. Otherwise, you can select and you can drop down and appropriately make a selection. From a storage point of view, I'm asking them to give me an 8 gigabytes of a storage, and which is going to be my root volume. Now there are multiple options in the storage. GPT-2 is a general purpose storage. There are other like GP2 and now GP3 recently came up, which is more cost effective if you want. I'm gonna leave it as GP2. If you need high IOPS, like if you are running a database servers, for example, and you might need a higher IOPS. In that scenario, you can choose either IO1 or IO2, depends on what your IOPS requirements are. There are other options available as well, like if you want to not use SSD and if you want to save some money and you want to use some hard drive, then you can do that as well from hard drive point of view. So this is going to be a root volume, but in case you need more, like you need along with the root volume, you need some additional storage to store your data, you can add a new volume, again similar to like this. Add appropriate storage, whatever the size is. Maybe you want to add an 100 gigabyte of storage, and you can create an EBS volume, which is the elastic block storage or the network attached faster storage. I'm not gonna add there, so we'll just leave it as is. And just quickly take a peek into the advanced detail. In this scenario, what I'm doing is I'm choosing an on-demand instance. So if we scroll up, uh, I'm choosing an on-demand T3 Nano. That means give me from your current pool of capacity, and I don't need to wait for somebody to make that capacity available. Otherwise, I can do something called spot instance. Spot instance is something the free capacity of AWS, and it's heavily discounted. So we are not gonna go into that. Another thing to keep a note here is instance profile. So with an IAM instance profile, you select a particular role which you may have created that allow you to do certain functionality. You can create a new IAM profile and then add additional permission for whether this EC2 machine can do X, Y, or Z. For example, if you need to connect this EC2 host with S3, then you need a permission and you need to attach that instance profile to allow EC2 host to connect to that. Also, the host name you can define, you can add some additional parameter, you can change your DNS parameters. There are other options on if your host got shut down, what you want to do. You want to terminate that host, or you want to have some sort of a protection for your termination. Additionally, from a monitoring point of view, if you want to enable the CloudWatch monitoring, which is like a detailed CloudWatch monitoring, and a few other options available, which are some of the advanced use case you may want to go into the detail. So now I have selected all my options what I need. I'm gonna say okay, launch instance, and it's creating the security group what we told it to create, and then it's initiating a launch. And here you can see that what it all doing right now. So it's initiating a launch, and we'll come back in a second to see what happened. Okay, so it took about 10 seconds or so, and now it succeeded all the steps, and it did created initiated a launch of instance test. So I'm going to click on this instance, and it's going to open up in a different tab. But what it should do, it should take me to that instance itself. So there we go. So we gave a name of web server 1. We got that instance ID, what we just saw that. It is the instance state is running. We chose T3 Nano, so it is T3 Nano. From a status check point of view, it still just got started VM, so it takes its own time. And we have not created any alarm, so it's no alarm exists. This is the one we did not decided or selected any availability zone. So AWS by default selected it for us, and it gave us EUS East 1D because we were working out of Northern Virginia. That means its region is already defined, but within the region, which AZ availability zone it connects to is what we just realized. Uh, we also did not say not to create a public IP address. So what it created, it assigned a public IP address to that EC2 host, and it gave us the name, the DNS name, which we can use to connect to the host, and we will do that in a second. So as I click on that, now we see all the other details, the host name, the IP address, and where VPC, which VPC it is connected to, and which Linux platform it is, what is the AMI name, and other details. Quickly, we will look at the security, which we created a security group, right? So we created a launch wizard to a security group, and if we, it's still loading the security group rule, we'll go through some other things. So here we look at the networking, and the IP address and the VPC and the other details of the networking is given out here. The storage, what is the root device name? It's the root is EBS, and we got an 8 GB of storage, which is what we asked for, 8 GB. And status check is still initializing. It will come back. Monitoring will take its own time, but here is where we can see the CPU, the network in and out, the disk IO, the disk read, disk write, what is the CPU credit balance, because we are using a T instance type. It does have a credit option, and that is how it's being operated. So now what we want to do is we want to connect to this node, right? So technically we want to connect to this public IP addresses. And for that we need to do some magic. So I'm copying the IP address and then we'll connect to SSH to that node. Okay, so here I am, and remember when we created the EC2 instance, it asked us to select a key, and I had already created a key vva.pem file. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect to that node, right? The node is the IP address what we decided, right? Not we decided, rather AWS gave us. So we can use this IP address or we can use the public DNS. For simplicity, I'm going to choose this public IP address here, and I'll say okay, SSH minus I and v pem file, and our user for that Amazon Linux is EC2 user. It's by default, like Ubuntu operating system as an Ubuntu, is Amazon Linux as an EC2 user. So here is what I'm trying to connect to this node. Let's see if it succeeds. Okay, it's telling us that okay, authenticity cannot be verified because it's a brand new host and we don't have the uh, key. So we'll say okay, I do want to continue, and here we are. So we did got connected to this host. It has the host name is like internal IP address, so it's IP hyphen 172.31.4.64. So if you look at this guy, right, here we go. The private IP address assigned is 172.31.4.64, and that's the host name they given, and we are logged in as a EC2 user. If we do uname minus a, there we go, and we got a Linux, that's the internal host name, and Linux kernel 5.10. It says Amazon 2. So yeah, we are on that host, Amazon Linux 2 host, and here we can do whatever we want. If we want to install, let's say Nginx, right? Can we install an Nginx? Okay, it's saying Nginx is enabled as a Amazon Linux Extra. So what we may need to do is we may need to install it like this. So I'll say, okay, that's fine, install it like that. I have no issues. So it's installing and asking, this is fine. We are done here. So let's say, is Nginx running? Okay, I made a typo, so correct it. Okay, so Nginx is dead. So what we may want to do is start. Okay, so let's check the status again. Okay, now it's saying Nginx is running. So what I'm going to do is quickly I'm going to check as a net state on what port. Oh, there are so many, right? So let's say grep 80, and there is something listening on port 80. So what does it mean? That means if I go to my browser, which I will, and if I use this public IP address or even the DNS, let's do the DNS this time, and do HTTP and this public IP address. There we go. We got our Nginx. Welcome to Amazon Linux on Nginx, right? How can we make sure that's the right one? So what I want to do is I want to find out where my Nginx config is, and from there Okay. There we go. Nginx conf, and my root is what I'm looking at, right? I want to modify the index.html file. There we go. My doc root is user share nginx html. So I'm gonna go to user share nginx html. I'm gonna modify. And what was our title for the page? Okay, welcome to nginx on Amazon Linux. So where is it? Welcome. There we go. Welcome to nginx on Amazon Linux. And I'm going to modify this file saying to the art of cloud. Save it. Okay, I made a mistake, so let me do this. Sudo vi user share nginx html index html. That's fine. You don't need to watch me doing this. The art of cloud. Save it. Let's go back again. There we go. Okay, so that's the right server, that's the right web server, and boom, we were able to get an Nginx up and running. We were able to get an EC2 host up and running, and we got a full OS here, so we can do whatever we want as long as that memory is sufficient, right? Remember, we use zero point 0.5 GB of a memory. So what I'm going to do now is I'll go back to my console, and I don't need this instance. So I'll say okay, instance state. Instead of a stop, I'll simply terminate it, and it says yes. Okay, terminate it. And hopefully if I do this, insufficient data, it's still running, but in a second or so it should show as a termination, and that should be good to go. Okay, alright, it's gonna take its own time to terminate, but hope you get the picture. Yeah, it's shutting down now. So that means it's successfully terminated. We see it here. And I hope you learned something around EC2.